All right. It appears as though the recording is on. I'm going to call the Public Record Advisory Council to order. Today is June 5th at 11:02 a.m. Welcome, everybody. Think we should probably do a quick round of introductions. I know we have a couple of new individuals that are joining us today, or at least perhaps new to some of us anyway. So I thought it might make sense for us to quickly do a round of introductions of the PRAC members. I'll go ahead and get started. I'm looking to see here if Shasta, there she is. Okay, good. She's there. So my name is Mark Landauer. I'm currently the chair of the Public Records Advisory Council. Shasta, why don't you go ahead and then we'll ask others to join. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Shasta Kernsmore. I'm the vice chair of the Public Records Advisory Council. Who's next?
I'll go next. Scott
Emily?
Stoffer. Oh, Emily. Okay.
I'm Emily Gothard. I'm a paralegal at SEIU Local 503 on the Public Records Advisory Council as a representative of the public sector workforce.
Thank you, Emily. Let's go with Scott.
Scott Stoffer. I'm the city recorder for the city of Milwaukee, and I'm the city representative on the PRAC.
Thank you, Scott. Tony, it's good to see you. It's been a while.
Yeah, it's good to see everyone too. My name is Tony Hernandez. I am a member of representing members of the public. Nice to see everyone.
Thank you, Steve.
Hi, I'm Steve Suo. I'm a working journalist and a member of the press. Let's see.
Steve, thank you. Brent, welcome.
Yeah, thank you. Brent Walth. I'm an associate professor of journalism here at University of Oregon, and this is my second PRAC meeting.
Well, let's go with Todd.
Hey, good morning. Todd Albert, Public Records Advocate.
Okay.
I can go, Mark. This is Stephanie.
Please do.
Okay. Hey, I'm one of the people with a cold, so no camera today. I'm Stephanie Clark. I'm the state archivist and sitting for the Secretary of State's office today. Thanks.
Let's see, anybody else there? Who are we missing?
I'm here. It's Andrea.
Andrea.
Can you hear me okay? Hi, Andrea Chiapella, Communications Director at DAS. Also have an awful cold for some reason. It's lingering and no one needs to see it. Thanks.
Very good. All right. Anybody else on the PRAC here? I do think, Luo, why don't you introduce yourself? I also want perhaps just quickly, I saw somebody else. Oh yeah, Miles to introduce himself just as a matter of courtesy to everybody.
Hi, this is Yufeng Luo. I'm the Deputy Public Records Advocate. I'm not a member of the PRAC, but always happy to be here.
Thank you, Yufeng. And then Miles, just as a common courtesy to make sure everybody behaves. Miles, go ahead.
Cameron Miles. I'm with the governor's office.
Thanks, Cameron. All right, everybody, a quick look at the agenda. Today, we're going to get an update on the Public Records Advocate reappointment hiring process. If my memory serves me correctly, Scott, we did on the previous meeting in April review the process by which the bylaw subcommittee on hiring of the Public Records Advocate had conducted a presentation. I don't know if the member of the council need a quick review of that, but it is our intention, I believe, today to approve that process, if my memory serves me correctly. Scott, help me out here. Am I correct?
I believe you are correct. I believe I'm blanking too. Did the whole council already meet and adopt that, or do we need to go through that process and adopt it today? Todd, do you remember? Did we adopt the whole thing at our last council meeting, or was that just a bylaws committee meeting?
No, the full council adopted it, and that's how we ended up with me needing to provide notice by May 31st. And I'm sorry, my system seems really slow, so I don't know if I'm coming through in real time to you guys or not, but my own vision of everyone is kind of like a blurred stickman type movement.
I'm seeing that too, but thank you for the confirmation, Todd. So Mark, I did prepare a couple of slides to walk us through this process, if that's helpful. If we're at that point, I can just share my screen.
Yeah, I was sort of having the same issues with my end and didn't quite catch Todd's response. Could you just confirm whether we did or did not adopt the process? Thank you.
We did. Todd and I's shared recollection was that there was a quick council meeting in April, I believe. And at that time, the council did approve the hiring process that the bylaws subcommittee had presented. So today we wanted to provide an update and acknowledge where we are with that, and then next steps. And I do have a couple slides. Would you like me to share those to walk us through that, or do we have to approve the agenda first? And I think we lost Mark.
Why don't we go ahead and approve the agenda, Scott? Thank you for keeping me on point. And then we'll go ahead and have that presentation by you. So are there any changes to the agenda? Seeing none, just approval of the agenda. Quick motion, please.
I move to approve the agenda as presented.
Scott moves and
Second.
Stephanie second. Thank you, Stephanie. All in favor? Aye.
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 All opposed? All right, Scott. Why don't you go ahead and thank you everybody for that. Scott, why don't you go ahead and take it away? Hope you can share your screen. Thank you.
Here we go. Can everyone see my screen at the PowerPoint slide?
Yes.
Okay. Let me make sure I can see you all while I'm doing this. Okay. So just a couple of slides. As a matter of review, the council at our last meeting approved, as we just confirmed, this hiring process, and it takes into account that there may be an incumbent public records advocate who would like to continue in the role, or what happens when there is no incumbent. And so there's the steps. It's 7 steps. It works from declaring an interest, a review, or hiring, a recruitment process ending with the new contract on October 1st. So what we can share with you today with the council is that we had established May 31st would be the deadline for any incumbent PRA to announce their interest in the position. And I've seen an email that was sent to the chair on May 28th from our current Todd Albert, our current public records advocate, declaring Todd's interest in continuing in the role. Therefore, per the outlined schedule or process that we agreed to, the next step is to initiate a public records advocate 360 review. So that's where we're on the process. And I think we might be hearing from Lu Feng a little bit about that process, but I think the main ask for the council today on this process is to, I think a simple majority motion vote, just to officially direct that review be conducted. So, but before we perhaps move to such a motion, I understand Lu Feng, and I hope I'm not putting you on the spot, but Lu Feng, did you want to talk about the review process at all? And if you need to share your screen, I can stop.
Sure. I sent out I guess the draft version of what the 360 review process will be, and it's virtually identical to the required executive director review that the governor has issued an order regarding. So it kind of matches. I think Todd sent out a version of that draft sometime this morning. I understand that's pretty short notice, so I am ready to kind of just share my screen and go over that process with the PrAC now if there's interest in that.
Yeah, I'm certainly interested, but I want to allow everybody an opportunity to ask any questions. The other thing that I'm curious about, Scott and Yufeng, is that at some point we're going to have to, if I recall correctly, we were going to appoint a subcommittee for the purposes of reviewing the 360 system. Can you perhaps remind me of that? Because I don't know at what juncture we need to appoint a subcommittee for the review of the advocate, and so that was one of the questions that just had popped into my mind, and so I'm curious to get your input on when we need to do that. And
Sure.
Shasta just noted that she did not receive an email from you, Fang, this morning. I'm also looking. Shasta, you may have received something from Todd, I believe. So perhaps that will address the question that you had.
I didn't get an email from either, so I don't know if I just didn't get it. Ah, it hasn't been posted yet. Okay,
I can go ahead and drop that in the chat if
great.
that's okay.
So I had to turn my camera off because I'm having difficulty hearing, and I hopefully that helps with my bandwidth. So again, I had two questions there. When do we appoint a subcommittee for the purposes of reviewing, right, the 360? Scott, did you have a sense for that?
Yes, I did, Mark. The process we approved at our last council meeting doesn't have a subcommittee until we're into the negotiation period. The process calls for the entire council to receive the review results, either in executive session at first for an initial briefing, but then also, of course, in a public meeting. So for the review, assuming that we're going to stick with the process we adopted last time, there's no subcommittee at this stage, but there would be a subcommittee when it gets into negotiating a new term.
Thank you.
And folks, it seems that I'm unable to just attach a document to the chat. So Todd, I don't know if you can just forward the draft that we have to members of the PrAC via email.
Sure, Yufeng, I'll do that now.
Could I ask a question of Scott?
Please go ahead, Steve.
So, in terms of when you say that subcommittee is appointed for purpose of negotiating, so that is after a decision has been made to retain or to hire somebody new?
Correct.
So who will functionally be, will the full PrAC then be deciding the question of whether to retain?
Yep, that's right. The process we adopted last time is the full PrAC receives the results of the review and then comes to a decision point as to whether they're going to proceed with the incumbent who's expressed interest or whether we want to launch a hiring process. But the review part comes before that decision point.
I see. Okay, I apologize. I was not at the last meeting, but so after the 360 has been conducted and presented to the incumbent, then the full PrAC reads it and deliberates.
Yep.
And where on the calendar will that, do you anticipate that happening?
I was going to kind of a little bit defer to you, Fang, and how long that. We have the hard deadline of October 1, right? The term ending and the new one starting. But I was going to defer to you, Fang, in terms of how long her review process. I was kind of spitballing, we're probably looking at July, August for that receiving the review, but I'll defer to you, Fang, in terms of how long the review will take.
Sure, I can answer that. So the guidelines that are set out by DAS are that it is 14 days upon receipt of the request for feedback. So theoretically, if I were to send out the request to answer the survey to all the evaluators, if I were to send it out at the end of the week, there would be a 2-week period for them to provide an answer, after which time I would aggregate and I guess anonymize some of that information just to present what the feedback is, and then I would present that to Todd, to the advocate, and also forward a copy of basically a summary of the results to either the PrAC or to the subcommittee. I'll defer to Scott on what order in which to send that.
I think as per the process we outlined, the full PrAC is going to receive the review information. So there's no subcommittee in this process until we made a decision in terms of how to proceed after the review. So it'd be the full PrAC at this point.
I guess another question, if I may. I guess for you, Feng, so will you be developing the questions for feedback? And is this described in the bylaws? Again, I apologize if not reviewed them since the last meeting. But
No, these are all fair questions, Steve, that go right ahead. I want everybody to be comfortable and understand the process.
I think it'd be helpful if I just shared my screen as I was explaining this process. To quickly answer your question, Steve, the questions are not developed by me, and they're not, I don't believe they currently exist in any form of bylaws for the PrAC. Instead, these questions are developed by the governor's office, essentially, as part of the executive director of 360. They're kind of standardized questions. Now, there is, the agency has the ability to kind of come up with tailored questions or any other questions that they may want to ask, and I have not done that. But if the PrAC had particular questions that they wanted answered, certainly that could be included in any outgoing survey. I would just have to know in pretty short order here. And with that, I can go ahead and share my screen, though I will note, I think Shasta has had her hand up for a while.
Yeah, I mean, maybe this is going to be, yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah, go ahead,
maybe
Shasta,
this is going to be answered, but I'm a little confused about who. So hi, Yufeng. Nice to meet you. So you're Todd Albert's subordinate, right? And so you'll be conducting his review. Is that a typical process?
So this is very interesting. I think it's because of just the size of the Office of the Public Records Advocate. The 360 review is typically conducted by, it says in kind of the language, any delegate or any other member of the office or HR. And we don't have, the Office of the Public Records Advocate doesn't have designated HR staff to do that. And so the only other person to delegate that authority to is to me as the deputy. Now, there are several other small agencies that have similar situations, and one of those is the long-term care ombuds person. And their office is relatively similar, right? Fairly small. And for their 360 review, it was also their deputy who was kind of tasked with doing this review. I recognize that it's kind of a strange situation to be in, but I think that one, it's the policy behind the 360 authorizes that, and also just as a practical matter, there's not really anyone else in the office, because it does state that it's somebody within the agency or HR that does the review. In our situation, there wouldn't necessarily be somebody else who's capable of doing that.
Shasta, does that satisfy your question?
It gives me the answer to my question, but I'm not sure that don't have any concerns about that. You know, it just seems like if we had an outside review, that would feel more comfortable to me, but maybe Todd has an answer.
Hey, Shasta. Well, I have my perspective and perhaps that'll be helpful. So Yufeng is in charge of administering the 360 review, but she's using an established process where she doesn't have the ability to alter the question. She's in charge of collecting and compiling the data and presenting it to the PRAC. If you choose to use that process, of course, she'll have all the underlying results that she could provide to PRAC members as well if they want to see the actual answers to the questions themselves. So hopefully that'll help allay any concerns that, you know, the process is transparent and complete. I think using an established process makes that easier, but we do have limited resources, and unlike large agencies, we don't have the budget to hire an outside entity company for thousands of dollars to perform a 360 review.
Other questions? I do have one question for myself, but we'll see if there's anybody else. All right, I'm gonna sort of ask you, Fang and Scott, sort of along what Steve was asking, if there are specific questions that members of the PRAC would like included in that questionnaire. Is that something that can be accommodated?
I will defer to you, Fang, but I think so. And I kind of think, especially since the delivery of these, the review document was delayed or not actually done before this meeting, you, Fang, you probably want to go share your screen and go through those questions and kind of lay that out.
Sure. A short answer to that is yes. Obviously, if there's a surprise question that gets requested, the closer to October that suggestion is, the harder it is to accommodate. But as long as we set a hard deadline for when these need to go out, the survey requests need to go out to the evaluators, and I think that's that can be accommodated. So let me go ahead and share my screen. Okay. Okay, can everybody see my screen?
It's a little
Could you
small.
make it larger?
Yeah,
Can I make it larger? Like that?
there you go.
Okay. Let me just see if I can, oh, well, maybe I shouldn't do that. All right. So let me know if there's anything that you're unable to see or have difficulty following along. So this is the process, the review process that we've sort of developed here. And it starts out with, you know, who are the evaluators? Who actually receives this request to perform an evaluation? And there is no strict requirement under the Office 360 review. There's a little bit of discretion that's involved, but following the general requirement that all direct reports receive an evaluation request, which generally just means anybody who works under Todd in the agency here, it would be one. And additionally, it depends on the board, it depends on the commission, it depends on the agency. So for our purposes, I've elected to include all voting members of the PRAC, and I've kind of just almost arbitrarily designated a 2-year window as appropriate. I guess it's not arbitrary in the sense that the 360 review itself is required to be undertaken every 2 years. So I think it's fair to have it capped at 2 years for evaluation requests for members of the PRAC who are currently sitting on the PRAC, as well as former members who may have served the term within 2 years of the evaluation. Another kind of group of evaluators would be from our requesters. These are the folks that receive direct assistance from Todd and from me. I think for our purposes, as we have continued to track requester information and kind of been able to maintain communication with requesters over the years, I think it's appropriate to kind of reach out to a number of the members of the public who have received direct assistance from Todd. And while that number is not exact, the best practice for these categories is 12 to 15 evaluators. So my thoughts are that for each category here of requesters, that we would pick around 12 or up to a certain number kind of at random to see if they can and are willing to provide that evaluation. The same for requesters who have asked for this office's assistance from state and local public employees. We do receive quite a number of those requests for assistance as well, and we definitely want to capture how their satisfaction with how Todd has handled their concerns, either specific to a particular request or larger concerns about public records law in general. Finally, I've left a category for media representatives, as well as, I guess more of an example, SPJ, Society of Professional Journalists. I will note that I know that there are public body kind of government representatives as well. And I understand some of those representatives are also on the PRAC. So I was kind of a little bit unsure about what kind of how to proceed in that category. So if the PRAC would like to discuss and add potentially any entities to represent state and local government, I think that's appropriate as well under this general category of I suppose interested parties who have worked with Todd. Are there any questions about that particular portion? Okay.
I don't have any questions, but I'll just say that I'm comfortable with that list of people for you to reach out. That matches what we had called for in the review process. I think all the different groups that we had listed in that hiring process are covered in your list. So I have no issue or additions.
Okay, I'll go ahead and move.
Yufeng, don't, you know, and I don't have a problem with this list, and I'm sorry, there we go. That's what I'm looking for. You know, the group of members of the public who have received assistance, I'm presuming that's an individual citizen, if that's fair. Requests from state and local public employees who have received assistance, I kind of consider that to be the government entities, I assume. Is that a fair way to describe that?
I think so.
I see, because it says employees. You know, it may be the employee of the government entity that had requested the information, right? Is that a fair way to describe that?
I think the best way would just be to give an example. So if a DHS employee who worked in their records custodian's office was the one who asked us a question about XYZ, and Todd answered the question, right? The survey would go directly to that employee. But I see your point that yes, that employee is a representative of that agency. So I'm open to suggestions about how, or if there are concerns about an individual employee fielding a survey.
Well, if I may, it just seems to me that the advocate is there to receive requests for assistance from the public as well as public bodies, right? And so in my mind, you've got the public taken care of. It seems to me that that third category, state and local public entities who have received assistance, obviously you're going to have to talk to the individual who directly or get the evaluation from the employees who directly represented that, you know, state or local government. It seems to me that's sort of the idea here. So that's the only sort of nuance that I have or suggest here, is that it's either state or local entity whose employee has received assistance, just so we're clear that it is coming from, you know, the other side of the, um, you know, the one of the primary responsibilities of the advocate is to sort of mediate between those two types of entities, right? A private citizen and a government entity, whether that's a employee or otherwise. It just seems to me that would make it a little bit more balanced if just from an optical perspective. Yeah, that seems to get at what I was driving at. I see Tony has his hand up. Sorry for mumbling there, everybody.
I was just curious if there should be any consideration for the organizations that have received training sessions as well.
Great point.
Wouldn't that be covered by assistance? I mean, that could be either,
Not necessarily, Steve. So those, the trainings do get tracked separately. They wouldn't be considered a request for assistance. And that's a great point, Tony, that those folks are certainly a separate category of people that I considered whether should be added or not. And I think it's still appropriate to add them. I think it was just more of a practical concern from the Public Records Advocate's office, in the sense that they're going to receive a separate survey for how the training went. And it would, I don't know. I mean, this is a good question that I think is appropriate for discussion.
Yeah, Tony, I think that's a excellent discussion, because sort of the two-pronged, if my recollection is the advocate has two primary responsibilities, one mediating between entities and the other is to provide training. And it appears as though we have the mediation part covered, but the training not necessarily here. So I think that's a really good point of discussion and open to suggestions here. But it does seem to me that training is a critical component of the advocate's work and ought to have some type of feedback on the quality of that training. So I'm open to suggestions, but it seems to me that that's a pretty critical component of the advocate's responsibilities, and we should seek feedback on the quality of that. Shasta.
Thank you. So I like this list of people here. A little confused about what the box means on the side, as far as are we combining requesters as members of the public and the public employees in that 12 to 15? Because I would advocate for there to be like a guaranteed number of people from the public, because that's ultimately who we're all here to serve.
So the box on the right is meant to capture the number of people who would fall under those categories. The categories that was originally where the requesters currently are, those are on the kind of model that's given by the governor's office. It's just a really nebulous concept called interested parties. And under interested parties, the suggestion is this best practice for 12 to 15 evaluators, but there is no cap to how many evaluators can be included as part of the survey. So I think ultimately it's up to the PRAC here to determine what is a reasonable number, bearing in mind that there is also kind of the practical reality where if we were to, for example, survey all of the, I'm trying to think how many requests for assistance we had last year. I think in the neighborhood of anywhere from 250 towards 300, right? If we were to do that, I think that would present some challenges, but I agree that there would be whatever number of requesters from the public and whatever number of requesters from state and local public entities, those would be balanced. It wouldn't be the case that the public would, get 6 versus an overrepresented amount from other categories. So I'm happy to hear what numbers can be suggested. I think, having an upper cap of 15 evaluators from the requester side can be a good number to start with, and anywhere more than that can be accommodated as well. It's just we do have to bear in mind that, you know, one, some folks just aren't going to respond. Or respond timely. And two, you know, assuming that we do get a lot of folks who do respond, kind of the higher the number, you know, the longer it might take to collate that information.
Sure. I mean, I can't remember what the, if we ever got some statistics on what the split is for like the percentage of requesters from the public versus percentage of requesters from the government, but I would advocate for that same split to be represented in the evaluators.
That makes sense.
Steve.
Yeah, I had a thought, not to be overly prescriptive, but maybe this will be helpful. So I count, other than you, Feng, the other categories total 5. There are 5 categories. So if you were seeking 3 from each, or as Shasta said, whatever the proportional breakdown is between public and government, I think maybe one approach would be to identify the full universe of each of those categories that would be eligible, and then find a way to randomly select, say, 6 in each category in hopes of getting response from 3 each. But the random selection part of it is what I'm kind of thinking it might be important, so that we're not, you know, biasing the outcome.
Other questions or comments at this point? Well, Yufeng, I think that this is a great list of people who need to be sought for feedback. I'm glad that it seems to me that this list is pretty comprehensive, touches all the bases. The hard part, of course, is ultimately selecting who those individuals are and hoping that they'll provide the necessary feedback. Are there any other comments or suggestions regarding those who should be sought for feedback? I'm just looking to see any other suggestion. Yeah, Tony, I see a physical hand going up there. Yeah, please go ahead.
Yeah, just for clarity. So there's like 14 members, 14 existing voting members, plus what, like 3 or 4 former, or 2 or 3 former. So that would be those numbers plus 12 to 15 of the members of the public, plus state or local public entities, plus representatives from the SPJ or media representatives. I don't know how many of those. So I guess I'm thinking about like 30 roughly evals in a perfect world of this situation. Is that we would already be reviewing?
I guess the question, Yufeng, Tony, if I may try to clarify for Yufeng, for the voting members of the PRAC, Yufeng, is it your intention to survey every member who has had at least 2 years on the PRAC, and from members formerly who had been on the PRAC within 2 years? Or is it your intention to randomly choose members of the PRAC for this 360 evaluation? Did I get that right, Tony?
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I'm just trying to get a better sense of whether the 12 to 15 is the whole 5 categories, or if we're, especially if the first category voting members, I mean, that basically doubles the 12 to 15, if that's the case. And I'm just curious in terms of like what the workload of, how many evals will we be reviewing?
So I fear that the 12 to 15 best practices note has caused more harm than it's given clarification. So that is a suggestion by the folks who developed the Executive 360, right? So the original suggestion was, besides direct reports and besides members of the board who sit on that particular board or commission, everybody else who is an interested party, you should have about 12 to 15 of those, depending on what categories those folks are, right? So there's a lot of discretion in how much you can do and how many surveys need to go out. For our purposes, for members of the PRAC, my thoughts are that this is the review year 2024. So walking back 2 years, back to 2022, all PRAC members or all folks who have been members of the PRAC during that 2-year period and have interacted with Todd during that 2-year period, those folks will all receive a request for evaluation. So that would include all of you sitting here today, as well as people who have served a term previously within those 2 years. So there is no randomization as far as a board is concerned. That would include all people who have worked directly with Todd during that time who sit on the board. Does that answer that question? Okay, and as far as Tony, I'm very grateful for your concern about kind of what are the practical realities of looking at all these surveys, right? So, if you have a large agency, potentially you could have a lot of interested parties. You could be looking anywhere from 30 to 60 kind of evaluations that come in, right? The language of the Executive 360 is that the person who sent out the request for evaluations, takes that information, compiles it, anonymizes it, because there is, as part of our email announcement, there is this kind of a promise that you can be truthful in everything that you say, because the director is not going to see it, that it's your name attached to it, right? So that information gets filtered out, right? And by way of example, the long-term care ombuds person, their summary of all of the evaluations was basically a PowerPoint with beautiful pie charts that shows for each category of questions, this is what the answers were, right? So, anonymized. Evaluations come in, I just send them all off in a blast email to all members of the PRAC, and everybody takes a look at everything. Instead, it would be that information presented in a digestible form. And just to ward off this question about, well, what about, there's a concern. What if we're picking and choosing answers, right? Just to pull everyone's attention down to the actual survey questions, you'll find that most of those are multiple choice questions. And if there are, at the bottom, if there are written responses, right, about, well, here are 3, for example. What additional comments or feedback do you have? If there are written responses for these 3 questions, those answers would be pulled in full and presented as part of that summary of feedback that I would present to the PRAC.
So I have a question that I think is actually kind of funny, at least to me, and that exposes my sense of humor. Are these responses public records? I would presume they
They
are.
would be, yeah.
Yeah.
I think they absolutely would be. The only thing is, I suppose because the language of the email says that there is this a summary and anonymization process, that there would be an exemption that you would be able to claim for that, but it is a public record. It absolutely is a public record.
All right. I saw that Steve would like to review the questions, and I'm having a little problem I seem to get a screen on my on the actual document. So I'm seeing 3 of you here, but that's probably operator error. But I did see Scott also had a question. Steve, you wanted an opportunity to review the questions, I believe. Is that fair?
Yeah, I think she was getting to that, but I just want to make sure there was time for Yufeng to walk through the questions.
And then Scott, quickly, you have a question there?
On that very point, I'm wondering in terms of process, we kind of scheduled this for an hour and we're 13 minutes to go, and I want to respect that. I don't want to lose members of the council. Would it be helpful to maybe, can we schedule a meeting in like 1 or 2 weeks and then give the council the next 1 or 2 weeks to review questions and provide feedback? I know that might push back the review by a couple weeks, but I think it might not make us get this conversation done in 13-ish minutes and give us time. Would a delay of a couple of weeks be a problem, Yufeng, for this process from your end?
Not from my end. Meeting in October.
And thank you. And would it be feasible for the council to schedule another meeting in the next 1 or 2 weeks?
I have no problem with that whatsoever. Shasta?
Yeah, I like that idea. I need time to read it and process.
Yeah, I want everybody to feel 100% comfortable before we go into this. This is too important for people not to feel comfortable with. So I'm perfectly happy entertaining a delay in sort of wrapping this up so that members can have an opportunity to review the questionnaire. I think that everybody has an understanding now of, who would be solicited for these questions, but I do want to give everybody the opportunity to digest the questions and provide any feedback on those questions before we give a final approval for the adoption of this process. I mean, I realize we approve the adoption, but we have to approve perhaps the questionnaire, shall we say.
I would agree with that, Mark.
Is it-
And I would just, on behalf of Yufeng, if I might, maybe you can tell us, we need council members to look at this like in the next week and get any feedback back to Yufeng like very promptly in the next week. I know that this will probably precipitate some sort of a doodle poll or whatever to schedule the next full council meeting, but we would just, help Yufeng and be timely in your response for feedback on these questions.
I'm fine with that. Is everybody comfortable with that approach? I'm not seeing any shaking heads. Great. All right. So I think what the next step is, and please correct me if I'm wrong, that Yufeng will share the questionnaire with the members of the PRAC. It's your responsibility to provide feedback ASAP. Yufeng and Todd, if you'll please pick a deadline to get that feedback back to you. And also, if you could, and I apologize, I know you all are busy and have real jobs here, but also send out a doodle poll for a subsequent meeting of the PRAC in order to approve the questionnaire, I think is the agenda. Hopefully that won't take very long, provided everybody provides their feedback in advance. And hopefully we can have a brief meeting to begin this process. I guess the next, I do have a follow-up question, but I don't want to get ahead of myself or the members. Are there any questions about that? Okay, here's my question, Yufeng, and perhaps Scott. Once we finalize the questionnaire, right, who's responsible, Yufeng, for identifying who's going to receive the questionnaire? Is it sort of a random process, or who's going to be responsible for identifying who the questionnaires will be sent out beyond the members of the PRAC or former members of the PRAC?
That would be me.
Great. So you will be responsible for that once the questionnaire has been approved. Is that correct?
Yes.
Perfect. Are there any other questions about the process?
I did just want to add, Mark, if I may.
Please go ahead.
The set of questions that are part of the questionnaire, again, I just want to emphasize, they weren't written by me or by the office. They're a set of standard questions that are in fact required by the governor's executive 360. So if anyone had concerns or comments about the way that a particular question is framed or structured, or concerns that it maybe doesn't cover something that you want to know about as part of the evaluation, I would recommend potentially suggesting your own question. I mean, not to invite complications, but I think that would be the way to deal with that, because as part of our obligation to complete the 360, that question in that current form would have to go out as part of the evaluation for Todd as agency director. And I know it not to conflate two things, but they're necessarily conflated because we're using one for the pracs process when there's a process that's already set out for that 360. And as far as a deadline, I would agree with Scott's kind of window for 1 week. So if I guess on June 14th, that would be next Friday, June 14th deadline. If folks are amenable to that, that would be what I ask for.
June 14th will be the deadline, Yufeng. I'll just take prerogative of the chair and lay that down. Sorry for those of you who may be taking vacation. You have a little vacation homework, sorry. Because I do want to get this process moving along. Any other questions at this point? I think we all know what we're responsible to do, review the questions, get back to Yufeng with any suggestions, and Todd will be sending out another doodle poll for us to reconvene to approve those questions. At this juncture, I want to do an agenda check to see where we are at this point. So update, item number 2, update on the reappointing hiring process. I think we've done that. Next steps, well, we're going to review the questions, provide Yufeng feedback, and we'll be reconvening the PRAC in the next 2 to 3 weeks, whatever that may be, as a result of the doodle process. My hope is that that meeting will be short, and that you will have all provided your feedback to Yufeng. And at that point, we will give, hopefully, Yufeng the go-ahead to begin soliciting feedback for the 360 process. I'm going to stop here and see if there are any comments or questions. All right, there's the awkward silence. I don't see anything at this point. Going back to the agenda, discussion for further work to be done by the bylaws committee. We've got 5 minutes here, Scott, and I don't want to go ahead, but obviously as a part, yes, Steve, I'll get that as well. Thank you. Scott, next steps on this at this point. We still have quite a bit of work for the bylaws committee, but this is the one horse that's staring us in the face of getting the advocate review process. So we do have quite a bit more work, I think, for the bylaws committee, but for the time being, let's perhaps focus on getting this part done, and then we'll readdress the bylaws committee, because we've been operating without bylaws for about 6 years. I don't think another 3 weeks is going to make a huge difference for us if everybody's comfortable with that approach.
That was going to be my suggestion, Mark. I think getting this set in stone and going, and then maybe this fall the bylaws committee can reconvene and start drafting bylaws.
Sounds like a plan to me, Scott. Thank you for being the chair of the bylaws committee. I can't thank you enough for that. And then looking at the agenda, sorry, public comment. I do note that there seem to be a number of members of the public here. We always try to provide an opportunity for the public to provide comment to the council. So for those of you in the public, if you would like to address the PrAC, please raise your hand, and we'd like to limit you to no more than 2 minutes if you can confine your comments to that amount of time. So members of the public, if you're interested in addressing the PrAC, please raise your hand. And if you can't raise your hand, just chime up. I know some of you may be on the phone. Andy, you weren't asking to be, were you asking to be addressing the council?
Are you talking to me, Mark?
Yeah.
Nope. Sorry, I'm not sure what I pressed.
Okay, I just saw your hand. So okay, very good. Thanks for
on process or something. That's all earlier.
Thank you. All right. It does not appear as though anybody from the public wants to address the council. With that, anything for the good of the order? Otherwise, it's my intent to seek a motion to adjourn. Anything for the good of the order? Well, I want to thank everybody for joining us today. It appears as though June has reappeared again, so please enjoy the nice weather. Have a wonderful weekend, and Yufang, we will look forward to receiving the questionnaire. And again, June 14 is the deadline to respond back to Yufang, and I'll accept a motion for adjournment.
Motion to adjourn.
Thank you, Shasta. Second. Thank you, Emily. With that, this meeting is adjourned. We'll look forward to seeing you here in the next 2 to 3 weeks, folks. Have a great week.
Thanks, Mark. Bye-bye.
Take care.
Thanks, Mark. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.